Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. It's an unenviable title. From 2014 to 2018, Saudi Arabia was the world's largest arms importer. The kingdom also spent more money on its military in 2018 than any other country, except for the US and China, $67 billion. And that's for a nation of just 34 million people. Most of those weapons came from the same countries that have criticized Saudi Arabia's 5-year campaign in Yemen. To transport much of that military hardware, Riyadh has relied on a cargo ship called the Bahri Yanbu. When it stopped at ports in Europe earlier this month, it was greeted by protests and lawsuits. Let's take a look at this report.
De toutes nos armes ayant servi.
And joining me now is Topham, an editor at the Sana Center for Strategic Studies. She also co-authors the monthly publication, The Yemen Review, and by Marwan Kabalan, the Director of Policy Studies at the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies, which is based in Doha, Qatar. Marwan, thank you for joining me on Straight Talk. So, as we saw on the report, most of the countries protesting against this Saudi cargo ship, which is suspected of carrying weapons into the Yemen war, are actually the countries which export most of their arms to the Saudi kingdom. Tell us about the dilemma here, and is Saudi Arabia too lucrative to abandon?
So it's very interesting if we consider these protests in light of the bigger picture around arms sales to Saudi Arabia. There's been a lot of change in Europe over this. Back in 2016, we saw a number of countries halt exports, but the real shift really came after the killing of Jamal Khashoggi in 2018. And straight after that, Germany halted arms exports. And over in the US, we saw a wave of political pressure, including from within President Trump's own party. And last year in the UK, we saw a landmark ruling that found that the UK government acted unlawfully in allowing certain weapons sales to Saudi Arabia. So we really do seem to be seeing a sort of groundswell of public opinion calling for greater scrutiny of these sales. And what's quite interesting, I find, is that this used to be kind of the purview of just activist groups and, very narrow, like issue-focused lobbying groups. We're seeing more voices joining this now, a wider chorus, and that's sort of a shift that is very interesting.
So Marwan, do you think, will this latest round of protests, as just Holly mentioned, in your opinion, have an impact on Saudi policies in the coming future? And if not, what else could change Saudi Arabia's
I don't think it will have real impact on the Saudi foreign policy.
But what else could have?
Well, because Saudi Arabia is not very much, I mean, they are dealing mainly with governments rather than people. And there is a clear gap between what people think about Saudi Arabia and what governments think about Saudi Arabia. People might care more about human rights violations in Yemen and elsewhere. Governments are mainly looking after their own national interests. This is the gap actually that has always been there in Western societies. Saudi Arabia is actually, as we all know, has the third largest defense budget in the world. It comes only after the United States and China.
Yes.
It comes even before Russia. In 2015, for example, they spent more than $87 billion on
Yeah, we're going to get
defense.
into that, yes.
Saudi Arabia is very important, actually, customer for the big arms companies.
So too lucrative to abandon.
I think
in
yes,
your opinion.
absolutely. And the Saudis, they understand that position very well. Plus, most Western countries actually believe that if we don't sell Saudi Arabia arms, somebody else will sell them. Now we can see that Russia and China are becoming, if you go to the SIPRI report, for example, the latest SIPRI report, the Stockholm Institute for Peace.
But isn't it all against the Europeans' core values of human rights?
I don't see that values are playing key role actually in the foreign policies of the Western countries, generally speaking. I think they care more about the economy is the most important issue for them, and the arms industry is very important element of this economic and commercial interest.
Holly, do you agree with Marwan that there's a great gap between people and the governments? Do you believe if these protests continue to grow by individuals or NGOs, that would eventually force the governments to revisit their arms deals with Saudi Arabia?
I think the pressure point is certainly with the national governments that are exporting the arms rather than Saudi Arabia. But I would say that there is some pressure to be bought. We have seen it in the past. In 2016, the Obama administration halted exports of precision-guided missiles following the funeral strike that killed 140 people. So I don't think we should be too fatalistic in this matter. I think there is pressure to be bought. And I think that is the direction of the shift we're seeing. Of course, as Marwan said, there is deep strategic alliances, economic relationships underpinning all of this. It isn't going to change overnight, but I think there is
just a start, maybe. So if you will, let's take a look at some recent statistics on this multi-billion dollars arms deals between Saudi Arabia and some Western countries. So Saudi Arabia, after the United States and China, has the third largest military budget in 2018, totaling $67.6 billion. It is also the largest arms importer in the world. Between 2014 and 2018, Riyadh spent $16.8 billion on arms. And during that time, a majority of its weapons came from 5 countries. 68% of its arms came from the US, totaling $11.5 billion. The UK, with a 16% share, sold weapons worth $2.7 billion. And France, with a share of 4%, sold weapons worth $733 million. So Marwan, what do you think Saudi Arabia, a country relatively with a small population of 34 million, needs to spend so much on defense? Is it really necessary?
We have to talk about 2 things here. On the one hand, about the threat perceptions that are actually seen by the Saudis, because they think that they want to challenge Iran, they want to actually protect their interest in Yemen and in many other places. But this is not the whole story.
Okay.
The story also has another face, which is political mainly. Saudi Arabia, by spending too much money on arms from Western countries, they are buying influence. This is what not only Saudi Arabia, but so many Gulf countries actually, they are spending money on weapons that they are never going to use, in fact. But what they are doing, in fact, is by spending too much money on weapons, they are, as I said, buying political influence in these countries. This is what Saudi Arabia is doing, and what
because we see Saudi Arabia failing and deterring any attacks from Iran or Yemeni Houthi fighters.
If we look at the record of Saudi Arabia in terms of military accomplishment, it's not that good. In fact, we have seen it failing in Yemen. We have seen actually it failing in Syria and in other places. So, as I said, it's not about military accomplishment. It's not about weapons that
just
they really
political
need.
influence
It's
to
about
exert on
buying
those
political
countries.
influence in the West.
Holly, quickly, give us a sense of a European vision, especially when it comes to living up to their international obligations, like the Arms Trade Treaty, which was once championed by France. Why do you think some countries have chosen to act on their own?
I think the issue with EU export control regimes is that it's one of the areas that falls into an issue of national sovereignty as opposed to a EU framework. So even though we have the Arms Trade Treaty, the Common Export Control, these issues generally are made at a member state level. Even though they're binding, there's not really any mechanisms to enforce them.
Okay. And are such breaches very hard to prove?
They're hard to prove. The wording in them often is fairly subjective. So they're based around this idea of assessing whether there's a clear risk. The issue there is who decides what a clear risk of civilian harm is. It's a very subjective issue. And as I said, is not really enforceable.
Yeah. Marwan, tell us about the latest on Yemen. And the Saudi-led coalition fighting in Yemen has just said it has begun judicial proceedings against military personnel suspected of violating international humanitarian law. What do you make of that decision?
I think I wouldn't take that seriously.
Is it a face-saving decision?
I mean, you can say that, and you can also say that Saudi Arabia may be trying actually to use this as one way in order to I know Saudi Arabia is becoming under huge media scrutiny in the West because of these human rights violations, especially in Yemen. And by trying actually to have these judicial proceedings against certain officers, I think they are trying to clean their record. It's more than something systematic in order to stop the violations of human rights in Yemen. It's more, as I said, it's about cleaning the record in front of this public opinion.
All right, I'm afraid we're out of time, Holly. Marwan, thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As Turkey approaches its centenary in 2023, the country is hoping to reach a series of milestones. One goal is to become a leading technological hub. With 5.5 million students attending 180 universities, Turkey has a large pool of young talent. The public and private sectors are on board, and their ambitions are huge. Many are hoping that big campuses like Teknopark Istanbul will one day rival Silicon Valley. Acting as an incubator for the companies of tomorrow, you can find almost everything there, from the latest in healthcare technology to robots and drones. Marwan Kabalan has more.
This is Turkey's hub for technological innovation. Alongside established companies, Teknopark Istanbul also has a dedicated space for startups. After evaluating dozens of applications they receive daily, an expert jury chooses ideas that they feel will be the most groundbreaking.
Some of the defense technology that the Turkish military is using actively in its operations has been developed here. A lot of creative ideas that are contributing to all facets of life in Turkey and beyond started here and are now contributing positively to people's lives. And the beauty of it all is that it's 100% indigenous.
Once an idea is accepted, Teknopark Istanbul gives the team a workspace and resources in their incubation center. It also provides legal consultancy, funding to attain patents, and helps them find investors. Teknopark Istanbul has an ambitious goal to nurture Turkey's next generation of tech leaders. With a series of incentives, Istanbul's Silicon Valley is hoping to make a dent not only in Turkey, but in the global tech world as well. Hundreds of firms have already taken up shop here, from the latest in defense technology to healthcare and software. It's a place where ideas come to life. And so far, more than 1,600 projects have been completed, and many more are on their way. Tunç Laçin has been a thoracic surgeon for almost 20 years. Using his experience as a doctor, He got together with engineers to develop software that helps diagnose lung cancer at its early stages.
This software helps the chest physician, the doctor, to go to the direct position to define the lesion, to name the lesion, whether it's cancer or not. And this system also matches the real-time images coming from the patient, and as these two images match to each other, the doctor knows where to go. So this is a pretty new technology. None of the companies all over the world do this.
Innovators like Tunç believe that his software will be available for use in hospitals by the mid-2020s and could possibly save millions of lives. There are currently around 300 technology firms and startup companies located at the Teknopark Istanbul campus. But that's only the beginning. The campus's management says that only 21% of the Teknopark Istanbul project is complete and construction is continuing. By 2023, they expect to be the home to over 1,000 tech companies, providing employment to more than 40,000 engineers. And by then, Turkey hopes to become one of the world's most innovative countries. Marwan Kabalan, Straight Talk.
And joining me now is Hande Cilingir, who co-founded the tech startup Insider, which specializes in digital strategy, and Ilhan Elgin, a venture capitalist and technology strategist who founded Core Strategy. Hande, Ilhan, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you here. So the Turkish government has ambitions to make Istanbul a rival to Silicon Valley. So I want to start with you. Sure. Give us an overall view on this project and similar ones like this one. And where does Turkey, especially Istanbul, stands when it comes to technology parks and research and development hubs?
Actually, the government's plan has started 10 years ago, not it's 2 years ago. So in last two development plans of the Turkey, government focus on this technology, innovation and entrepreneurship. Based on that, they give the two different directions. One of them, the universities, with technology transfer offices and the Teknopark. The second one, the corporate side, give them the grants and some other incentives. So if you look to Turkey, Turkey has a big population, which is really good opportunity, and also the geographical position is very good. Yeah, everybody knows that it's a gateway to two sides. The other thing is that we have a good corporates, help them the entrepreneurs. So government sees the opportunity. If we catch the ideas and entrepreneurs, we impact the funds to come to Turkey. So now we have the big plan to use it. So our government has lots of organizations to support the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and it's going very well right now. Mm-hmm. And the numbers are getting higher. 2010, we have a $12 million investments in Turkey in the startups, now more than $100 million.
It's a significant rise then.
Yeah.
So Hande, you were granted the most successful female entrepreneur award by Microsoft. Tell us about the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Turkey, especially when compared to other prominent countries.
I think we are improving for sure. We are improving everything in terms of funding, in terms of the number of startups, as Ihsan mentioned, and in terms of the, I think, entrepreneurs' vision about the technology, about establishing new startups. I think we are improving the things. But I would say still we are like in the early days. So I think there are lots of things to do. But to me, the most important thing that we need to concentrate, focus on is actually improving our vision about being or creating more global companies. So we should
How are you going to do that?
Well, I think biggest action to do that will be thinking about global from the very first day. Because most of the companies still have very limited approach about staying in Turkey only, which is a very limited market at the end of the day. And this is today, when we look at the most improved markets in the world, like Silicon Valley, like Israel, they all managed to go outside of Silicon Valley and creating global companies. Same for Israel. So this is why I think from the very first day we should have this approach. This is the most important thing. But I think especially the entrepreneurs, in terms of having the courage, establishing their own companies, even after the graduation, now it becomes like much more stronger that to see that also they have this vision now. I think everything is going quite well, and we are pretty much optimistic about that.
Isa, you teach to help tech startups commercialize their innovative ideas. You also give lectures at universities to encourage and prepare students for the tech world, business world. How is that working out for you, and what are the most frequently asked questions?
Actually, the starting point is they're asking for their families.
Families.
Because they don't support them very strongly. That's the cultural issue, actually. But now it's a little bit changing. I'm dealing with that to motivate the families, also help their kids be entrepreneur.
Let me understand, because according to Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, most European and North American countries show lower interest of attitudes towards entrepreneurship, whereas countries like Turkey, Poland, and Netherlands, over 80% of people now speak highly of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, but there is a misunderstanding about that point. Educated person, educated kid, their family they don't support. If you are not educated, they are supporting them to be entrepreneur. But from entrepreneurship, we understand high impact entrepreneurship, which means that you can be going to be a valuation like $1 million, $100 million, $500 million like Hande. So if you're gonna create entrepreneur startups like this, you need to support, motivate the families of the educated kids.
So you have to reach their families.
That's right.
So for a long time, business world, especially the tech world, has been dominated by men in Western and advanced countries. So Hande, as a successful female entrepreneur from Turkey, you don't quite fit the mold. Tell us about what women are going through now and what advice you would give younger women who want to break into this tech world and business world.
I think first they need to see that life can be much more broader. It's not only about just saving money, have a family, have some kids. Of course, those are all good things, but at the same time, they should have the vision like thinking about life can be much more broader, and they can change the things, they can influence the things. I think any woman or any man can do that. First, they should have a belief in that. This is the most important thing. Once they have a belief in that, there won't be any, understanding about, or let's say, any discrimination between men and women. They won't feel like in that way. So I think there will be no, kind of disadvantage for the woman to do the things like establishing a new companies, tech companies. So I think they should only not to think about they are women and maybe they have limitations. They don't. Once you have overcome this feeling, then everything will be much more easier. The second thing I would suggest, and I can only suggest because still I'm on the way, I don't see myself as a very successful entrepreneur. We are still learning too much. I think we need to look at the world much more. Reading, learning from the others. Those are the two only things that we can actually know more about the things. I think we should do that more, especially females.
So Turkey has suffered from brain drain for decades. Smart, brilliant children chose to have a career abroad. Now the Turkish government wants to revise this situation. How are we doing on that?
Actually, it was good if you think like 2010 to 2007-8. After this, some things happened. They started to go again out of the country. But it's not just the government's job, actually. It's a big corporate job also. Make the life easier, make the work life is better for them to stay here, not just the government. But government's dealing with that. They are creating new grants for the entrepreneurial talents, so helping to the corporates do the R&Ds more and help to the creative people stay here. So, but it's challenging, of course.
Okay. Why would foreign companies want to invest in Turkey?
Because we are a much more hungry country in terms of being successful.
Okay.
And, once we, for example, sit on the table to do business, we all know that we should actually do something different than the others. So because of this level of hungriness in Turkey, they should invest in Turkey. We are much more passionate compared to many other ecosystems in the world. And we know that we have no other option than being successful. So our life depends on this.
Will there be unicorns from Turkey? Because if I'm not mistaken, you want your company to be Turkey's maybe first unicorn. And how close you are to this target?
I think we don't have a certain wish about that because being a unicorn is not an achievement. We don't see it as an achievement. I think it's a byproduct of going global and creating a successful company. So it's not a target, but it's a good indication in the world that Turkish ecosystem is also improving. So more unicorns definitely should be, but it shouldn't be the target. It should be the just byproduct of the success.
Okay, Hande, Ihsan, I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk. Appreciate it a lot. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ayşe Süberker. If you've got any comments, do share them with us on Twitter with the hashtag Straight Talk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.